Welcome to this episode of the Shared Security Podcast. And this week I am joined by very special guest, Dan DeCloss, founder and CTO of PlexTrac. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Tom. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been talking about having you on the show, and I've been on your podcast probably, a month ago?
Oh, yeah, something like
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so we're trading podcasts, so to speak. I think it's great.
yeah. No, super excited. No, I've been looking forward to it.
So those of you that don't know, Dan and I go back a little bit. Back in the day, you were at Veracode, actually before I was there.
Yep.
This is like 2015, 2014.
Yeah, I think I left Veracode probably 2014 timeframe, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've stayed in touch ever since, really. And maybe for our audience that doesn't know who you are and your background, can you tell us a little bit about who Dan is and this great product called PlexTrac?
So I've been in cybersecurity. I probably got in the most formal ways one could have back in the day. This was 2005. I went to the Naval Postgraduate School for the Scholarship for Service program, for those of you that know it. And it was just a great opportunity for me, and got a master's degree in computer security, rubbed shoulders with some of the brightest people in the field, got to learn from guys like Chris Eagle in reverse engineering. And so just was having a great time. Learned a lot, and then just got to start my career in the DoD, and then even more of a niche into web app pen testing. And that's how I got into Veracode, was through a good friend, Andrew Reifers, but I think he's going back to Veracode now.
He's back at Veracode. I saw that on LinkedIn. That's crazy.
Yeah. So worked there for many years, and just then moved into private sector, like enterprise, as opposed to like consulting. And so as I was doing penetration testing, started to recognize like, hey, we've got this problem around, I'm OCD for one, right? It's like I'm writing a report, and if a screenshot's not the right number of pixels, it drives me nuts, and so things that nobody else would notice. But I'm like, I'm spending way too much time on this document, and I feel like we could be spending more time actually finding the vulnerabilities that people are paying us to find. But the report is still really important. And then I would, especially in times at Veracode and then other places where you'd come back and you'd realize that people weren't actually fixing the things you're reporting. So, and not everybody, but a lot of people, okay, we're checking a box, or, hey, this seems like a problem. Okay, we're reporting some really critical issues here and they aren't getting resolved. And we're also spending a lot of time on the reporting process. Can't we just remove the whole document process to begin with and just keep it very collaborative, interactive? That was the original mission of PlexTrac, was to, one, save time on writing reports for penetration tests and security assessments in general. And then two, provide a more collaborative experience for the constituents, the recipients of the report, for the tracking and remediation and all that. So that was really why I started PlexTrac, was to solve those problems. And we've been fortunate to grow and fill a need and have a big vision for where we're headed. So yeah, it's been a fun journey, and not without its twists and turns, for sure. But it's been exciting.
Yeah, it's been great just watching PlexTrac grow and evolve over the years. I've just been really impressed with your journey, and to see where the product has gone today. And all started really because you saw the problem with reporting and just the way that it's so difficult, especially with penetration testers. I remember when I was a pen tester, and I'm sure it still holds true today. It's like reporting is the bane of our existence, right?
Yeah.
We want to spend more time hacking, and our clients do actually as well. But that report is oftentimes the most valuable piece of a pen test. So I'm glad you're able to focus on that.
Yeah.
And it's just really great to see your success.
Well, thanks. It's been fun. We've been super fortunate to have a great team that's helped grow the company, and good team of investors. It's all around, it's been a great team effort, but it is crazy to see something from just an idea to where we're at today. So that's been fun. So yeah, and thank you. Thanks for your support too.
Sure, of course. Yeah. So outside of PlexTrac, you've been on a lot of different podcasts, and you've been in the industry for a while. And I've been asking this kind of all of our guests recently, and I've gotten a lot of interesting responses. What are your thoughts on the state of our industry right now?
I think that's a good question. I would say it continues to evolve like any industry. I would say it still feels very chaotic, right? I think that there's still a lot of focus in a lot of different areas, right? And I think that just if you were to take a snapshot of a security engineer's day, their attention's getting pushed in many directions, right? And so in that regards, I think that it still feels chaotic. And I go back to the way I was thinking about this in my early days of my career, where I was like on the blue team, so to speak. And this was the late 2007, '08 timeframe. And I just felt, hey, it seems like we're always adding in an appliance onto our network. It's pre like Wi-Fi and zero trust or what all that. But I feel like we're just always adding these appliances to where we just have to like have these point solutions for different problems. And then you got to manage with the appliances to figure out to get data out. And it still feels that way in different ways, right? And that there's a lot of things that are continuing to compete for our attention. But I think what I would say is different is it feels like most people recognize that now and are starting to really regain focus on, hey, how do we actually move the needle forward to actually improve our security posture? I think that there's at least from my experience and the people I talk to, there's been a demonstrable shift in focus away from, hey, how do I continue to get information, but actually knowing what to do with it, right? I don't know. I'd really be curious on what other people think, but that's what I would observe today in terms of our industry.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people that I talk to. I think that there's a certain level of maturity that I think we've gotten to in our industry. There's a generational kind of, I don't want to say gap, but I feel that I hate to say it, but you and I are kind of part of the older generation now. Someone called me a veteran the other day, not of the military,
Right.
but like a veteran of the industry.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm 50 now, and I've been doing this for like 18, 19 years. So yeah, I've seen a lot. We've all seen a lot. And I think there's an interesting kind of perspective that the younger generation brings into the industry. And I'm actually really hopeful.
Mhm.
We can joke all we want about millennials and Gen Z and all that, but I'm actually hopeful because I see a lot of ideas. I see a lot of innovation. I see a lot of that now being pushed by the younger generation. And I hope that veterans like us, can be accepting and we can start listening to some of the ideas that this younger generation has.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. It's funny because like this, I would call myself a leadership nerd or a leadership junkie. And so I actually wrote I have a newsletter and I wrote a small piece on just, hey, I've done a lot of research and studies around different generations and how they show up for work, right? And some of the things that shape the generation and whatnot, but those generations. But I think what's important is, within any industry, you've got younger, innovative talent that you really, want to make sure, hey, they understand like the basics and fundamentals of what we're trying to do, but can bring that ingenuity and that creativity to be able to think about things the way that we wouldn't have thought about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely very hopeful for the future. So I think it's great.
Yeah.
We were just at RSA, right? And it was like AI everything.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on, is this a game changer? I think everyone's agreed that it is changing the game. It is going to be influential in our everyday life and in the industry. But what's your take on it right now?
Yeah, I agree. I think I've also said, I think within security itself, and maybe I'm just blowing smoke here, but this is my opinion, we're once bitten, twice shy with AI. I remember the 2018, 2017 timeframe, AI was making a big push in our space. Lots of vendors on the floor touting AI. And there was definitely some cool things going on, but it definitely didn't meet up to, I think, the expectations that we were hoping that it would. And I think that this is a seminal moment from a generative AI and what we now have capable at our fingertips is really impressive and also a little daunting. I think it's another frontier that typically classic, those of us that have been in security, it's okay, now I got to go learn something else to make sure, how does this work? How do we protect it? How do we secure it? But I do think that it's a game changer. I think it's going to continue to not only improve the way that we get work done in the security space, but also I think it's also going to be a huge factor for advanced attacks, right? I think attackers know, they learn the technology quicker, if not better than we do sometimes, and they'll put it to their use. And we're already seeing that. So I think it's a seminal moment in our space for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a little bit of overhype, but I think that's just natural with any new technology that comes out. We've seen this. I think you had mentioned ML, and machine learning, everything is machine learning. And like you said, the early days of what we see AI today. But it was like that when whatever zero trust, there's
Right.
another example, right? Everything was zero trust. Do you even know what zero trust is? You're just throwing that term around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's funny how words and the way we name things gets maybe misconstrued or used for a different purpose.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
go ahead.
AI could be a lot of different things. I think now everyone's like assuming we're meaning LLMs and Gen AI, but AI has been an integral part of our lives for a long time. It's what happens when you get in the car and it suggests that you're going to the grocery store because it's Wednesday night and that's when you go get groceries. That's AI that's learning your behaviors, right? So we've had it for a long time. I think you're right. There's a lot of hype around what this portion of it is. I think what's fascinating is just the amount of data that can be processed and actually produce fairly relevant content for what you might be asking it to do, right? Which is what I think is really going to help improve efficiencies all around the board.
Yeah. And I think I just saw an article about how we can't afford AI because of the power consumption and the generation required. Eventually, it's going to basically on the tiers of technology as things grow, it's going to be just a huge drain on the energy grid
Right.
and all these things. It's crazy
Yeah.
to think about that.
Yeah. No, I think those are all interesting things to
Yeah.
contemplate, right? As we may start to rely on it more too, right? So similar to other
Yes.
technologies that we've developed over the last 150 years, right? Like, hey, what's the full impact of this, right?
Right. Totally. Are you still relying on outdated managed file transfer tools? In today's world, the security of your sensitive data is more critical than ever. Introducing Kiteworks, the most secure and modern managed file transfer platform available. Kiteworks is audited yearly and continuously monitored by certified third-party assessors. With an ongoing bounty program, regular penetration testing, and one-click appliance updates, Kiteworks minimizes vulnerabilities like no other. Many traditional MFT solutions can't compare to the level of security and functionality Kiteworks provides. But that's not all. Kiteworks offers a world-class secure file sharing and email platform. Easily send automated or ad hoc files through fully integrated shared folders and email. Administrators can manage policies in a unified console and create custom integrations with their comprehensive REST API. Step into the future of secure managed file transfer with Kiteworks. Visit kiteworks.com to get started. That's kiteworks.com to get started today. On that topic, though, how do you think attackers are going to evolve? Like you had already mentioned that there, and we've talked about this on the podcast, that there are people using AI to create phishing pretexts, and there's all kinds of these attacks now, even though there's some debate over, are they actually using this, or is it still I think it's on the cusp of a lot of attackers still don't have to use AI.
Right.
They could just still conduct their attacks without it.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. One day, I think they are going to start using it more. How do you think that attackers, even outside of AI, how do you think they're going to evolve?
And that's probably the billion-dollar question, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think that in general, I think we tend to always feel like there's a cat and mouse game. As new technology presents itself, it just changes and increases the attack surface. And so I think attackers will always be a half step ahead of the game in terms of, hey, these new technologies, or these are the entry points, these are the threat vectors that we have to go exploit on them. So I think that's always going to be there, regardless of the technology that we're talking about. So from an evolution perspective, I think that just what we've seen over the last 20 years, it just continues to raise up through the stack. So the human factor are still going to be probably the most vulnerable and weakest link. And that's not a slight on anybody. That's just we don't operate at the pace with as much objectivity as computers do. So I think we're all human. The human element is always going to be the most important and primary target. And for that, I don't think attackers need to be using AI today to do a lot. It's just they can create their attacks quicker. They can do things more effective and more efficiently. And then just, I think, looking back at my time when I was in the government, the more mature companies are the ones that are going to see the more advanced attacks early on, right? So government agencies, they're going to be on the front lines, and same with the larger institutions. And so how attackers are going to use AI to actually breach or attack those organizations, I think is going to be interesting to see, right? I think that AI today, we've seen that it can produce different payloads and different types of attack vectors based on the technology stacks that it's going for at a much more rapid pace than you would have to do manually. So I think those are some very tactical, practical things that are going to happen right away. It'd be interesting to see what we're looking at in 2 to 5 years from now. But I think AI is going to be at the center of a lot of it in terms of how they're conducting their daily operations moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's no different than how we're using AI in our daily lives to make things more efficient, speed things up, become like a helper of sorts,
Yep.
or a personal assistant. I think that's the other big use case. Take away the mundane and the repetitive type of tasks that we as humans really just don't want to do, and then allow us to focus more on the things that we should do and the things that are more critical. And I think that goes for an attacker as well. So we actually might see a lot more sophistication
Yeah.
in attacks, because now an attacker can actually focus on the good stuff instead of the mundane.
Yeah.
Be interesting.
Yeah. So no, yeah, it'll be interesting. We live in interesting times, like I was.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. The other thing I'd love to get your take on is, and we have an election coming up, and there's all kinds of stuff going on
Oh yeah.
with the election, but political candidates aside, how do you feel about like deepfakes and that whole problem in terms of influencing not just elections, but nation states leveraging that and criminals?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid concern. And I think we was chatting on our podcast with Jason Haddix and company a couple months ago now, and talking about this very thing where the deep fakes, like I think it was the headline where someone got on a Zoom call. Everybody on the Zoom call was fake, and they convinced the CFO or the financial director, whomever, to transfer like millions of dollars out of the company. And those are the kinds of things that are like, oh man, this is really bad, to the point where you have to revert almost to some old school techniques of, hey, if someone's ever calling, pretending to be me, ask for a code word that we've never spoken about or written down or anything like that. Things like out of band kind of old school type stuff. But I think it's important to make sure that we're aware of it, because especially when it comes to like elections and influence on behaviors and decisions that are really important, like that, those are prime targets for these kinds of things, and trying to be as discerning as possible. And in some respects, I think whether you appreciate the validity left or right in terms of like media, but coming to some trusted sources to get information, I think generally, hey, is everybody talking about this the same way in this scenario, or these facts? Do multiple people from all spectrums seem to be like validating them? Is more of an old school way of trying to discern like whether the information is true. And beyond that, I think then you have to fight that kind of technology with more technology. I don't see a way around it, because I think there's two, like you and I, we've been in this space a long time, and I think we'd probably both admit that it would be hard for us to distinguish some of these deep fakes. And so think about like your 80-year-old grandmothers and like that. It's almost near impossible, right? So I think finding other technologies to be able to help identify those types of things is really going to be another really important way to thwart them, right?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next emerging field, honestly, is this deepfake detection, what's real, what's not, and social media. I think I saw a stat that the majority of people these days get their news from TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.
Right.
So it's people aren't really watching the major media outlets these days, mainly because of probably for political reasons, right? But if people are getting their news from TikTok, where manipulation of video that's the thing, right?
That's like right there.
Yeah. I just talked about how we're old and we're veterans, but we are now the ones, we're flipping through TikTok videos and YouTube shorts and all these, and our attention span is so short.
Right.
But now imagine like the younger generation, it's even worse for them.
Right.
Because that is part of their generation and how they consume content. And so we really have to think about the controls and the validations and how does something get validated? And it's almost like you have to start with, you can't believe anything you see on a TikTok video.
Yeah, exactly. Trust nothing and then try to verify some of that information. Yeah, I know it's fascinating. I think like I remember hearing this would probably have been like 15 years ago where most people got their news from late night comedy, like the late night, like Jay Leno.
The Late Show. Yeah.
Right. It's like, what? But that was probably still informed, accurate to a degree news, but now you're just getting it from anywhere. And so, no, I agree. I think, and coming back to the kind of the generational thing, one would maybe hope that if the younger generation, this is what they've only known, what are their techniques for discerning truth versus?
Oh, that's good.
And what did they bring to the table to help those of us who remember I didn't have a cell phone growing up? I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting. So,
yeah, I often, like my wife and I and my friends, we all discuss about how, because you're about the same age as me, and I think we grew up in that generation of we were in the middle of a change.
Yeah.
I grew up without a computer, but then all of a sudden I have a computer and I have my first cell phone, and like we remember the days before technology, and we always laugh about what the hell did people do before Google Maps?
Yeah.
And it's simple. We asked for directions.
Exactly. Like you pulled out this thing called an atlas and you wrote down what your turns were going to be.
And it was no big deal. But now, like, I'm so ingrained in technology, like I could never go back. I guess I could if I had to.
Right.
But
yeah.
Why would I when I have a GPS and I have a supercomputer in my hands?
Yeah.
To do all of that.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. Nope. It's interesting. And I remember, man, I just wasted 4 hours like waiting for web pages to load.
Yeah. For a 56K modem.
Exactly.
Gosh, we're old.
Wow.
That was considered blazing fat at one point.
Yep. No, and I think that's like what we've seen is a lot of change in the technology sphere. I think this AI movement is another one of those changes where it's like, hey, how is the world going to adapt? And from a security perspective, how do we continue to assure validity, security, and privacy, right? I think those are all the things that we always should be at the forefront of, right, before it's out of hand. Because we know legislation's always going to play third fiddle. It's just going to take forever to catch up, right? So.
It will, definitely. This has been a great conversation, Dan. Really enjoyed speaking with you. How can our listeners find out more about you and PlexTrac?
Well, thanks. Really enjoyed the conversation. You can find out more about PlexTrac just through our website, plextrac.com. You can find me mostly on LinkedIn, just Dan DeCloss or D DeCloss, I think is my little handle at the end of it. I put on a kind of a bi-weekly newsletter, so try to share what's on my brain. So might put you to sleep every once in a while if you need it. Really always enjoy talking to you, Tom. So it's been fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. Much appreciated. And for everyone else, thanks for listening. And until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on X @SharedSec. And help support the podcast by joining our Patreon to get ad-free episodes, bonus content, and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.